Showdown slate. We got kind of a good one tonight. A little bit better than some of the ones we've seen in the past, anyways. Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos, Pat Mahomes, Joe Flacco, just two elite quarterbacks in the primes of their careers dueling. What's going on, Alex? How are you? Excited about this slate? It's a really interesting one to break down, isn't it?
Man, I'm always excited about Thursday night showdown. I mean, I love showdown so much because a couple of years ago we had to wait all the way to Monday to find out how we did on Thursday games. But
We
now, yeah,
we don't
now
appreciate how much it's revolutionized our fantasy lives, right?
that's right. Yeah, it's like everything about it is so much more exciting. It's like the showdown experience. Your fortunes can change on every single play. I mean, you can be at first in play number 125 of the game, and then there's like a kneel down, and like you move into like 500th or something. So it's always a wild trip.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into things here, tell us a little bit about our sponsor, Fantasy Draft.
Man, Fantasy Draft is really revolutionizing the industry with their structure of how you do it. They have a membership fee instead of break, and that means you're paying a lot less to play on Fantasy Draft than other sites. And what that translates to is you win more. And for example, a few weeks ago, I finished third in their main event. First place was 100K. On most sites, they give a lot to first place, but because of this large site fees, they really don't pay out that much if you don't finish first. So on a lot of contests, you'll see first prize is maybe like 5 or 6 times of third prize, which might be 15% of the first. So if the first prize is like a million, third would be like 15 or 150,000 or something like that. But on Fantasy Draft, I finished third. I got 30,000, so it's twice as much as compared to other sites. So
Man, great point. Great point.
yeah,
You still have like kind of these top heavy prize pools, but also you still have the chance to get paid out if you're in the top five, which is always nice.
exactly. No matter where you finish, you're getting paid more. Like you get paid more to cash, you get paid more to finish in the top 10. First is about the same. That's the one spot that's similar, but everywhere else you're getting paid more money to play there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you like rake free daily fantasy, head on over there. They have monthly packages, depending for all levels of players. If you just want a casual player and you play less than $1,000 every month, then it is just $5.99 per month. It's a great deal. So they are back with the 300K Hooters main event. A lot of Team Awesome had some success there. Of course, we have fantasy draft rankings. We have fantasy draft ownership projections. We got everything you need. So let's get into this showdown slate here. I think what we're going to do is break down these two teams, talk a little bit about the pricing, talk a little bit about your projections, which I believe are free today. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. We have a free piece of content for every showdown slate on Thursdays. You can get my projections free. Of course, it's only one piece of the puzzle, so you're gonna want to sign up and get the whole thing. But very valuable to know how each player is projected to do on a given day.
Absolutely. And then I thought, like, after we break down these teams, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about roster construction for showdown slates, about building on FC, about how you approach this narrative that we're seeing kind of develop when you're talking about building successful lineups for these slates. You kind of have to craft a narrative, and you have to think about both correlation and ownership. So we're going to pick your brain in the second half here and talk to you a little bit about some of those things. If that's good with you, maybe you can give away some of your secrets here.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of the inside info you guys are looking for here.
Oh my God, it's perfect. All right, so let's dig into the Chiefs here, or just overall thoughts on this game and this slate to begin with. We have a 48-point total, I believe, with the Chiefs only favored by 3 points. What's your initial impression of this game?
Man, well, looking at the line, I was a little bit surprised because in my head, I think the Broncos aren't that good. The Chiefs are one of the best teams. Of course, injuries come into play here. The Chiefs are a little banged up. And also the Broncos may be better than people might expect with Joe Flacco leading the charge. So looking forward to this game tonight.
Well, you've got some inside bookie information that the Broncos are going to win tonight, right?
That's right. I talked to one guy who is a very experienced sports bettor, puts a lot of money on every game. He said he's all in on the Broncos, and he claims that every sharp is pretty high on the Broncos spread.
Nice. All right, so I have done some initial crunches here with your projections. One of the things that really stood out to me is I'm getting a lot of Patrick Mahomes. He's the most expensive player on this slate. I am also getting not very much Patrick Mahomes in the captain spot right now. He does not seem to be fitting into these highest projected lineups in that captain spot. What are you doing with Mahomes tonight?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta like Mahomes a lot. Any slate he's on, he is a little bit injured today. The ankle issue has been bugging him. Last week he only ran the ball one time. Previous week 4 times, so his rushing is down a little bit. But his passing's still been good. He averaged about 8 yards per attempt over those 2 weeks. And Tyreek Hill coming back should be a boon to his passing performance. And of course, we got complete all-stars like Byron Pringle in the mix too.
Nice. So yeah, with Patrick Mahomes, like he's never really. I don't even think he's had has he had a single fantasy performance where he wouldn't have ranked in the top 6 in any single game? I highly doubt it. He's been pretty amazing. He's about as safe as it comes on this slate. So will you be using him in the captain spot at all, or are you just going to let the projections go as they may and just use him as more of a flex spot?
Well, I think that I have no problem putting Mahomes in either spot. The fact that he is running less leads me to maybe value him more in the flex spot, but still he is projected to be the top scoring player, but based on my projections, more than twice as much as any other player today.
There you go. That works. It looks as well. I was just looking at the Denver Broncos here. Their pass coverage grade ranks 5th in the entire NFL. Their run defense is ranking 1st. So they have a little bit of a funnel going on right now. So the way to attack this team is probably through the air. Bryce Callahan also out for that team. Let's talk a little bit about the Kansas City Chiefs receivers. Sammy Watkins has been ruled out. We have, of course, Travis Kelce. We have Tyreek Hill, who only saw about a 50% snap share last week. And then, of course, we have all of these other guys kind of rotating in. We have Mecole Hardman. We have Byron Pringle, and we have Demarcus Robinson, who had an 86% offensive snap percentage, but is priced up. What are you doing with these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers tonight, Alex?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting because there is some uncertainty here. Tyreek Hill did not play the full game last week. I'll pull up his stats right now, but he had an amazing game. I think he got 2 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. But he only was in for 22 of 44 passing plays. So that leads me to believe they're easing him back in, and you're not going to see kind of his normal production that you're used to just going off last year. And that's going to open up some more opportunities for their other receivers, Robinson, Hardman, and Pringle, of course, the one that won the Showdown slate not too long ago. So I think all those guys are going to be reasonable plays tonight.
No Alan Lazard for you tonight?
Well, Pringle would have been the Alan Lazard if he didn't have a complete game breaker a couple weeks ago.
So we've seen with Watkins out, we've seen Pringle snap share 78% in week 5. Mecole Hardman was 62% in week 5. And then we get Tyreek Hill coming back. Both of those guys, their snap shares, pretty much all 3 of them dropped a little bit. So we're seeing probably about a 4-man rotation here. Would you say that's probably the correct way to go about it? And if so, then Pringle really becomes the best value on the board, doesn't he?
Yeah, man, Pringle's been good. Let me pull up the salaries here just so I can compare them. It looks like Hardman is the most expensive, which is kind of crazy. Well, that's on Fanduel. Let's see. He's also so on Draftkings, Robinson is the top price, Hardman is second, and Pringle is last by a lot. Mm-hmm. In Fanduel, Pringle's also last, but this guy, I haven't ranked the highest of all the 3 guys, as you're saying. He's been on the field more than them with Watkins out, or more than Hardman at least. Robinson's on the field a lot, but he just doesn't get the targets. So, for reference, I have Hardman getting targeted about 14% of the time when he's on the field. Demarcus Robinson about 12%, and Pringle at about 17% based on this year's performance. So I think Pringle is probably the most likely to have a breakout game here and the cheapest.
So $2,800 on DraftKings, probably a better bargain over there than the $7,500 on FanDuel. What's the just to digress here for a minute? What's the main difference in the way you approach these slates? Forget the captain spot. Just it seems to me like there's less value. There's less value on FanDuel, right? Because you have this built-in $5,000 minimum price, whereas DraftKings goes all the way down to $200 or $100. How does that affect the way you approach those two different slates?
So I think a lot of the $200 plays usually are kind of trap plays because people think they're being so sneaky, picking some guy that's $200. But like these guys don't project well, usually at least. So the cheapest guy that I projected to score any points is Jeff Heuerman at 800, and I probably have him projected for 2 points. Maybe he'll get lucky and get 8 or 10, but he still needs to be one of the top 6 scorers to make your winning lineup in most instances. So that really is a trap play a lot of people fall into on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you gotta be more conventional because, as you said, the minimum price is a lot higher.
So there will be no downtown Freddie Brown in your lineups tonight.
Yeah, who?
Little thing called the practice squad, Alex.
Oh man. Well, are you touting Freddie Brown here?
What's that? No, I'm definitely not. I think he had 1 snap last week, but he did go to Mississippi State in the SEC. So you never know. Let's talk a little bit about Travis Kelce. He's underachieved thus far, though. A lot of his peripheral stats are kind of similar to last year. He's still getting targeted. He hasn't put up that really big game yet. He's just not getting the touchdown. Just 1 touchdown through 6 games. Probably in line for a little positive touchdown regression in the near future. How much of a core play for you is he? Talk a little bit about your captain spot usage of him and how you'll be kind of stacking him up with Mahomes tonight.
So I think Kelce is as good a captain as anyone. I have him projected to be the second most likely to be the top scorer on the slate, and it's as you said, where he just hasn't gotten touchdowns. To me, that's mostly luck. The Chiefs have really underachieved in the red zone so far. They just haven't been throwing a lot of touchdowns, and the tight end is usually a beneficiary of those red zone touchdowns as opposed to the long ball. So I think that's kind of showing that Kelce may be undervalued by the public just because he hasn't put up that big fantasy score yet.
That is a good point. Kansas City was second in red zone conversion at 73% in 2018. They are 20th this year, 52%. So great point there. Probably due for some positive regression as well. Let's move on to the Chiefs running game here. Do you have any interest in these guys? I've noticed, especially early on in the Houston Texans game, they were targeting their running backs quite a lot in the passing game. How do you approach both using the Kansas City Chiefs running backs and then also whether or not you stack them with Mahomes on the off chance that they, if one of these guys, McCoy or Williams or one of the Williams, I guess, does catch a pass and go, whatever, takes it 60 yards to the house. Are you going to be, if you have them with Mahomes, you're probably looking at some unique setups, despite the fact that generally speaking, quarterbacks and running backs don't correlate very well. So first question is, what do you think about the Kansas City Chiefs running backs today? And secondly, how will you be deploying them in your lineups?
So I probably prefer McCoy, and he's cheaper. So he got 8 runs to Damian Williams 1. They ran the same number of routes last week. So that shows that LaShawn McCoy is really kind of being eased into the majority of the workload over Damian Williams. And I think that if you buy into this Mahomes injury where he's not running as much, then the consequence of that is he's going to have to check down a lot under pressure to the running back. So I think that LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams could be even better than on average weeks.
What do you think? Do you think a lot of people do that now, or do you think that's a contrarian move on these slates? Or what percentage of people, I guess, if you had to guess, are actually combining their quarterbacks and running backs these days on these small slates?
I'd say that a lot of I think most people probably just approach it picking their favorite plays or whoever fits, and Sean McCoy and Damian Williams aren't particularly expensive compared to some of the other guys like Tyreek Hill, like Kelce. So if people are playing the Chiefs, it's pretty likely they're going to put in McCoy or Damian Williams. What would be your approach there?
Yeah, I think like it's a unique way to approach things, right? Like we saw you had some success a couple weeks back when I believe you had Mason Rudolph, Jalen Samuels, James Conner in one lineup, right?
Yep.
That was probably a pretty unique lineup at the end of the day, and we saw that work out. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense in correlation, but it does make a lot of sense in terms of uniqueness and in terms of some sort of game plan or game script. And I believe, what did you finish, 4th in that GPP? That was a pretty darn good score.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. That week, because Jalen Samuels was so low owned, a lot of people winning outright prizes. I think that there is a certain set of scenarios where they'll run the ball 40 times or more, like because they're going to be up in the game so much. The Broncos will be struggling, and the Chiefs will just have the ball more. So I think in those scenarios, it's pretty likely that McCoy and Damian Williams both get a lot of rushing attempts, and Mahomes is one of the top scorers on the slate. So I think that having all three together isn't that crazy.
All right, I like it. Denver Broncos as well, bottom 10 or about 10th in receptions allowed to running backs and targets allowed to running backs this year. Small sample size, obviously, but there you go. All right, let's talk about what we're all here for: kickers and defense. Seems like you can't win a slate these days without just firing off as many kickers as you can get into your lineup. I don't know. Maybe there's even a backup kicker on here that you can get in there. What are you doing with the Chiefs kicker indeed this week?
I think that I always start my day on Thursday just Googling who the kickers are, because they never report about any kicker changes, but it looks like it's the guys we're used to: Harrison Butker and Brennan Mcmanus for the Chiefs and Broncos. Since I'm expecting this game to have a decent amount of scoring, I mean, the over-under is 48. Neither quarterback is really known for throwing excessive amount of interceptions. I'm more leaning to kickers today than the defense. And one side I look at is the field goal props on different sportsbooks. I noticed that one sportsbook had the over-under for the Broncos field goals at 2.5. And, the juice was on the under, so it kind of worked out to 2 field goals, but that is quite a large number of field goals. So I think that both of them make good plays here.
So there you go. If you figure 2 field goals, maybe an extra point, maybe one of those field goals is over 40 yards or whatever, that's all of a sudden 10 points for a pretty good price, right?
Exactly. I find that kickers, in my top stacks tool, they'll often show up as very likely to be in the top 6 scorers on the slate, but unlikely to be the captain. Of course, we saw last Showdown slate that kicker and the captain, maybe it hits once in a while, right?
Should have put the ref in the captain spot there.
Yeah, don't remind me, man. I'm still hurting after that game.
God, I must be so hard to be a Lions fan and watch this nonsense year after year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Chicago now, so I got to root for the Bears too, unless they're playing each other. So any ferocious animal, really, I root for in football.
I like it. That's a good rule. Question for you as well about kickers. What do you do? Do you ever pair both of them up in the same lineups? And if so, how often do you pair them both up?
I don't think there's really advantage or disadvantage to pairing them both up. So if that fits in your lineup, then go for it, is my advice. I've won some tournaments in Showdown with both kickers, so I think it's a pretty viable strategy.
There you go. You heard it here. 100% double kickers in all your lineups tonight. Let's move on to the Denver Broncos side of things. Talk a little bit about Joe Flacco and this Broncos offense going up against this Kansas City defense. It's in shambles, allowing the most fantasy points across the board to just about everyone. They rank, I think, 31st. Let me just pull this up. They rank 25th in fantasy points allowed so far to quarterbacks, 5th to running backs, 9th to tight ends, Surprisingly, 20th wide receiver. So what are you doing with Joe Flacco here?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs' defense really isn't that great. Like they have a lot of trouble getting the opposing team off the field, and I see that in my projections because I factor in how long the drives are for the other team. So I think it's about a 5 to 10% boost for the Broncos as far as the number of plays they'll run, and more plays equals more fantasy points. So I think that the Broncos are in a pretty good spot here. Flacco hasn't been terrible this year, averaging 7.3 yards per attempt. And, I mean, they're not that big of underdogs in this game. I'm actually ending up with more Broncos in my lineups than Chiefs just running my crunches initially. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like it, and I think I'd love to talk. We'll talk a little bit more maybe about lineup construction here because like the Broncos are so much cheaper, and they're probably gonna have to pass the ball to stay in this game. Courtland Sutton's been great; he seems like a great bargain. But then you've also got the running attack as well, which is a pretty nice option for the Broncos too. So I feel like you can kind of use both of these sort of storylines from the Broncos as well. Looks like Manny Sanders is healthy. And you've got you've got a number of weapons, I think cheap weapons to pair him up with to offset the cost of those Chiefs.
Definitely. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos players are higher owned than the Chiefs tonight, even though, I mean, the Chiefs are much easier, but you have to complete a lineup of 6 people, and it's hard to do that with your favorite Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to see these ownership projections probably in the next couple hours here. They will drop. So if you do not have an Awesemo subscription, make sure to come on by and check it out. One of the great tools we have, as well as the top stack tool, which tells you the likelihood that a player will be the top scoring player on the slate relative to their ownership. So if a player is going to be owned 40% in the captain spot and he's only a 20% chance of winning or of being the top scorer, you might want to think about fading there. But definitely one of my favorite tools to look at for every one of these showdown slates.
Yeah, actually, the ownership projections are out. We got
nice.
Our boy Byron Pringle at 16%. What do you think about that?
Whoa. That seems really low.
Yeah, I like it at that ownership.
Oh my God! Yeah, I'm in on that. Let's go Byron Pringle in the captain spot. Fire it up. Now that's a great option because I think you're going to need some savings along the way if you're rostering some of these Chiefs. So Pringle, we haven't really seen his snap count go down. Sammy Watkins predominantly running out of the slot when he was healthy, and we're not seeing like one player take over those slot duties. We're kind of seeing Mecole Hardman, Robinson, even Tyreek Hill, as well as Pringle sort of mix and match in that slot. So I think at that price point, you're essentially getting the same upside as a lot of these other receivers for a much cheaper cost. So I will definitely be overweight on Pringle today.
I like it, man. I hate to make a Pringles reference, so I'll just leave it. I'll just leave it hanging there. But yeah.
Hey. All right. Let's talk about the Broncos. So we got the Joe Flacco. You're pairing him up. I've noticed in my crunches getting a fair amount of Emmanuel Sanders, getting a fair amount of Courtland Sutton, a little bit of Deshaun Hamilton, and as well, I kind of like Noah Fant tonight. What's your take on these receivers? Who you liking? Who you fading? And who are your favorites to pair up with Flacco?
Based on the props I've been seeing, I think I like Emmanuel Sanders the most compared to the perception in the industry. So the reasons why, he has been targeted 38 times to 46 for Courtland Sutton. So pretty close given that Emmanuel Sanders has been a little banged up, hasn't run quite as many routes. And so I think they're actually pretty close in projection based on my model here. And Courtland Sutton, we have projected to be more popular and he's significantly more expensive. So I think that going to Emmanuel Sanders makes a lot of sense.
All right, I like it. You're probably not going to see a lot of Manny Sanders ownership, especially in that captain spot, because of what you just said, the narrative that he is banged up. So he may still be banged up, but we've seen him he's just able to I feel like play through this. We've seen on multiple occasions. You've also got a little bit of recency bias going down there with just 4 targets over his last 2 games. So, but he was a full in Tuesday's practice. So I think that's a really good call. Though I do like Cortland Sutton a lot too. I think when you're just looking at the prices of these guys compared to the Chiefs, and you see that plus matchup, it's really hard to get away from this Broncos passing game. Any interest in Noah Fant at all?
Yeah, Noah Fant is kind of interesting. He is getting a good amount of snaps. He ran routes on about 2/3 of snaps, which is pretty good for a tight end. And he's been pretty productive with his targets, 74% catch rate, 10 yards per catch. So that equals a pretty decent value play there. And I will go back and I'll point out that last week Emmanuel Sanders only ran routes on about half the plays. Sutton ran routes on 90% of the plays, so there is a pretty decent chance that Sanders will not be full strength this game. So I'll walk back what I said about Sanders a bit, but I think he's a nice contrarian play.
And as well, he gets a matchup. I don't know. I'm fairly certain that Kendall Fuller is out. Yeah, he did not practice, got a thumb injury. He's out tonight. He's been one of the worst Chiefs cornerbacks so far, usually working in the slot. If Kendall Fuller could beat someone out, I don't know if his replacement is going to be any worse, but that's probably one of the better matchups on the slate there, going up against whoever is patrolling the slot there for the Chiefs. So there's another small tick in the plus column for.
Nice, man.
Them.
You talked me back into it.
I like it. What about this Broncos running game here? One of the things that really stood out to me when I crunched with the Osmo projections is that Royce Freeman comes out as a great value on this slate, whereas Philip Lindsay's a little bit more expensive. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with those two tonight.
Yeah, I think both players are pretty even this year, especially if you look at last week's box score. Philip Lindsay ran 16 times, Royce Freeman's 11. But Royce Freeman actually was on the field more often than Lindsay, and he ran routes more than twice as much. So I think that this is pretty close to an even split as far as fantasy points. And I have Lindsay projected a little bit higher, but he's significantly more expensive, so Freeman is my preference here.
Kansas City giving up the 4th most fantasy points thus far to running backs, though their DVOA is actually not that bad, relatively speaking. Are you going to be using, let's say you decide that you want to use Royce Freeman in the captain spot. What does a Royce Freeman captain spot lineup construction look like for you most of the time?
So I think the Royce Freeman captain spot, maybe I would stack the Broncos, hope that they control the game and they're running the ball a lot. Hope that Royce Freeman gets those end zone touchdowns, and you get lucky there. You're going to need for Freeman to be the top scorer of the slate. But I think that it is a reasonable possibility that he is the top scorer. I have it about 7%, so he makes a nice kind of contrarian captain.
All right. Kansas City allowing the most rushing yards in the entire NFL as well this year, 818 rushing yards. But surprisingly, about middle of the pack in terms of receptions allowed to running backs. So score another point for Royce Freeman there if Philip Lindsay is just more of a passing back. But though that contradicts a little bit what you just said about his work in the passing game. So, okay, let me get back to this point here because I'm a little bit curious. You got Royce Freeman in the captain spot. Would you go like 5 Chiefs? Is that a possibility? Would you pair him with 2 running backs? Like how are you crafting a narrative around a Royce Freeman captain spot nuts play on the slate?
So I think the Broncos would have to do pretty well. So I'd probably favor those players. Maybe some Joe Flacco, some Philip Lindsay, hoping that they just run the ball a lot and both guys get a lot of work. Maybe Noah Fant. Definitely the Broncos defense. Probably I'll consider the Broncos kicker, but I'll probably have like 5 Broncos in most lineups where I have Royce Freeman at captain.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's helpful people out there because it's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around what these game scripts are and who it benefits the most, depending on if a game goes a certain way and what combinations correlate well depending on the game script, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that sometimes you want to play for those game scripts that aren't as likely. Like we saw a couple weeks ago, Indianapolis versus Kansas City in Showdown. Kansas City really kind of blew it that game if you didn't have Byron Pringle. So Colts stack worked out pretty well.
I believe you were on the Indianapolis Colts defense that game, if I remember. And I was like, that's it. Austin's lost the plot. Forget it. And turned out to be a great call.
Yeah, defenses have been on a pretty hot streak in Showdown. Like the Lions defense was looking pretty good until they got those penalties. But yeah, we'll see how it fares today. I don't think Broncos defense is silly at all.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the kicker and the Broncos defense as well tonight. We'll transition into the nicely into the Broncos D conversation there. No Bradley Chubb, of course. Do you think that they can put up any kind of fight tonight against this prolific Chiefs offense?
I think so, because I mean this line is only +3 for the Broncos, so I'd be taking a pretty hot take if I said that their defense doesn't have a chance. Mahomes, he doesn't throw interceptions at a high rate. It's about average. But I'm expecting he'll pass it a ton this game, just because that's been their kind of MO this year so far. They've only run the ball about 1/3 of the time. So I think that there is a pretty decent chance that Mahomes throws an interception. As far as sacks, I have it is a little bit of a tough spot for the Chiefs. For the Broncos to get sacks. So it's not a play I'm over the moon about, but I think they're reasonable.
All right, I like it. You never know. Maybe that Mahomes has Mahomes even thrown a pick this year. One interception, 14-1. So maybe that second pick is coming.
Yeah. Well, if you have the Broncos do like me, you're kind of on it.
All right. I think we've broken down both of these teams pretty well. Any players that I missed that you'd like to go over, or any sneaky sleepers that we didn't miss tonight? Are you heavy on Jeff Herman?
Actually, I ran a crunch. I didn't have a single share of them, but actually, now that I think about it, it's because I have this minimum projection enabled on Fantasy Cruncher. So
right.
One thing, if you're using Fantasy Cruncher to build your lineups, you want to do at the start of every Showdown slate, make sure offensive players versus defense is set to more than 0 so that you can get defense in your lineup. And then change that minimum projection a little bit so that you can see every player in your lineups.
I like it. Yeah, that's a mistake I've made a couple times. I'm like, wow, Osmo's projection is really not liking defense today. Yeah, my bad.
I've done it too, man. I crunched all my lineups without any defense, and I'm like, well, I don't want to go back and do it all over again. So sometimes it happens.
Cross your fingers. So let's talk a little bit about your fan. Oh, sorry. Before we finish things up, any thoughts on Brendan McManus? Do you like him any more than Butker? Do we have a field goal total there?
Yeah, I think he's a little bit better than Butker. I've the Chiefs projected to get touchdowns at a higher percentage than Denver, so I think Denver might have to kick some extra field goals and benefit the kicker.
All right, I got one more name for you, Blake Bell.
Man, does he even play? Which team are we talking about here?
Tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was in on. I think they're using him as more of a blocking tight end these days, but he's actually got some physical tools. I don't know how many routes he ran. I don't have that handy, but he played on 36% of offensive snaps. I'm guessing mostly as a blocker.
Yeah, it looks like he ran 8 routes. I have him projected for 3.8 yards. Let me check why that is. I've been projected to run about routes on about 25% of the plays, and he's only been targeted 4 times out of 66 routes this year. So this isn't the guy they're really looking to very often.
There you go. I like it. All right, we got a few minutes left here. Let's just let me pick your brain on Fantasy Cruncher and your process a little bit. So let's say you got your projections, you're going in there, you're setting your lineups. What are some of the steps you take when you're constructing your Showdown lineups?
Yeah, I think the main emphasis here I mentioned is that Fantasy Cruncher like allows you to optimize based on projection and based on ownership, and if you can do a really good lineup with both of those factors, so what I'll probably do if I'm using Fantasy Cruncher solely is I will crunch. I'll sort by highest projection. You can or highest ownership projection. Figure out which teams are the chalkiest, and in Fantasy Cruncher, I delete those, sort by projection, and delete the bottom projected, and then I have some really nice lineups to work with. And what I'll do on Showdown slates in particular is I'll set some rules. So you want to have the right player correlation. So if you have the quarterback, if you have Flacco, you probably want one of the receivers in the lineup as well, especially. But you want to be smart about it, because it's like if you have Flacco, Manny Sanders, and Cortland Sutton on your lineup, you probably want one of those guys as the captain, because that means Flacco is going to have a great game if you win. So I think making some rules for how you like set these guys up, what you can do using the groups feature in Fantasy Cruncher, is a pretty good step for getting the right players in your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And the My Data feature as well is super handy in the auto group creator is what I meant. Sorry. One of the features of FC Pro as well, where you can make a group for every captain above a certain amount of fantasy points, and that allows you to correlate well, I think, probably with some heightened accuracy.
Yeah, definitely. I think the auto group creator is great when you have a bunch of teams playing. As far as the Showdown slates, I only make like a few groups, so I just do it by hand. But basically, I'll say if I have a captain quarterback, I want at least like 2 of the receivers. If I have them in the flex, I want between 1 and 2. And some rules like that, mostly around the quarterback.
Nice. And just to talk a little bit more about your weeding out process. So you will group them by the total ownership of the lineups, and then you will cut out some of the higher owned combinations just to cut down on the differentiation. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, definitely, because like we've seen it so many times in Showdown where you finish first and then you don't get as much as you want because so many other people have that lineup. The best way you can account for that is just figuring out which of your lineups have the highest ownership based on our projections. And if you avoid those highest owned lineups, you should have a better chance of winning a tournament and not splitting with as many people.
All right, I like it. All right, let's wrap things up here. Give me your favorite captain pick tonight and your favorite sleeper pick tonight.
Well, sleeper, that's easy. I mean, Byron Pringle, right? We already talked about it. He's been stepping up with Watkins injured, and he's going to be low owned. Let me throw this back on you, man. Who's your sleeper pick?
Oh man, I'm not allowed to take Pringle, I guess, right? Let me look at our ownership here. Utility ownership. Oh, well, I'll go to the other side of. I'll stick with the Chiefs. Sorry, and go with Mecole Hardman, also getting not very much ownership. Still running some routes. He's pretty expensive, and I can understand why people are going to shy away from him. It's not a great value play, but at that ownership, he's got the speed to break a big one, and I kind of like tossing him in, maybe even just at that rate, and hoping he breaks a big one. Pair him up with Mahomes.
Nice, man. I like that.
Favorite captain?
Captain, one guy I think might go under the radar is LaShawn McCoy. I think people usually shy away from picking a running back at captain in the first place. Yep. But a lot of games, they'll go under the total. So if there are less than 48 points scored in this game, what you're going to see is it's because the game is slowed down by a lot of rushing attempts. And McCoy is the preferred guy to get those attempts in Kansas City. So if Kansas City dominates this game on the ground, I think he has a great chance of being the top scoring player.
I like it. I will go with Patrick Mahomes as my favorite captain choice. We have him projected at a 25% chance of being the top player on the board, or I should say you have him projected. So I would be pairing him up with some unique combinations and then bringing it back with a few Broncos. Probably going to be really tough to get away from some of the chalkier lineups tonight, but I think Byron Pringle and Mecole Hardman are great places to start. Mahomes and those two, and all of a sudden you're looking good. But, suboptimal, I'm sure. I love that LaShawn McCoy call as well. We haven't projected under. We have projected his ownership is projected as less of a chance than him being the top player tonight. So good call on that one. Probably going to fly totally under the radar as people try and stack up these big name Chiefs, not noticing that LaShawn McCoy is in fact taking over the number one duties as the season progresses. That's good.
I'll throw out one more point here is that Damian Williams was kind of the number one running back to start the year. So people who haven't been paying as much attention may be higher on Williams than really justified.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Anything else going on at awesemo.com that you want to tell us about? Anything coming up for this show? We got NBA next week. Getting excited for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got so much going on. This past week, we released our first NHL ownership projections, so I've been excited to.
So good.
Thanks, man. We've been excited to kind of up our game in that area this year. For NBA, I got a couple of features brewing. I mean, I'm releasing my projections this season for the first time, and projections in the NBA are almost king, so I think that's going to be huge.
You might have to start playing NBA.
Yeah, man. I recommend it. We have this deal going on with the early bird promo, NBA early bird, where you get $100 off the full season. So I recommend that. And
wait, $100? That's a pretty darn good deal.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was crazy when the guys proposed it, but that's what the deal is. So take advantage of that while you can. And then for NFL, I mean, every week you can win so much money on Fantasy Draft. It's a great place to play because you got the rake free, so I recommend playing there a lot, going for their top prize in the main event, and use the tools on our website, the top stacks, the ownership, the projections, and of course the analysis by all the guys working hard on our shows and writing articles for the website. And if you put all these things together, you're going to have a great strategy.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So yeah, we have we got all of those amazing features. Head on over and check it out. You can use promo code NBA Early Bird for $100 off. Of course, Fantasy Draft as well. If you use promo code AWESEMO, you get for 1 free week of rake-free tournaments, which is better than 17% rake or whatever else some of these sites are charging. So we have NFL Strategy Show, of course, every single day at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Pacific. We have the betting show tomorrow with myself and Ben Rasa. And coming up today at 4 o'clock Eastern, we have the NHL Strategy Show. Jake Hardy and I will go over all of our thoughts on the upcoming NHL slate. So NHL is a lot of fun this year, new scoring. Make sure to come check that out. And good luck tonight, everyone. I hope one of you takes down the I don't know, 100K. How much is the prize? Super.
It's probably like an absurd amount of money that will be split like a bunch of ways.
I hope one of you takes down an absurd amount of money.
We'll split it with them.
All right, deal.
All right.
Oh, and of course, you and I are back tomorrow for the Yahoo show. So if you're playing over on Yahoo, come check that out too.
Sounds like a plan.